Hi, it's Joni Michaels, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Joe Clark, host of Consider This program. Joe's a certified financial planner and former professor at Purdue University. He's the managing partner for the Financial Enhancement Group. Joe's passion is teaching people about their money so they don't make inefficient financial decisions that lead to frustration and devastation. The Financial Enhancement Group serves more than 900 families in 31 states and manages more than $400 million. The Financial Enhancement Group takes care of people who don't want to worry about their money so they don't make inefficient financial decisions. Joe addresses your questions about money in 5 critical elements of finance: retirement planning, or what we like to call your life after work, tax planning, investment planning, life happens, the good, the bad, and the ugly of life, and legacy planning. The Financial Enhancement Group can be reached at 800-928-4001 or visit yourlifeafterwork.com. The Financial Enhancement Group is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Securities offered through World Equity Group, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC.
Hello and welcome to Consider This. Joe Clark, Sherry Contos, and others. You are listening to the best of Consider This put together over the last few years of this show. You can find the information from the show on our website at yourlifeafterwork.com, iTunes, and various other places. Obviously, we're here weekly on WILO from 4 to 5 p.m. and Sunday mornings on Shine 99 between 10 and 11 a.m. Consider This really is a show that's much more than just the weekly headlines. We work together to try to give you insights and directions into things that you may want to consider about your financial lives. And the questions come in many directions. You can always reach us on Twitter, hashtag AskBigJoe. And of course, you can email us your questions. Consider this, that's all one word, consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. Good morning and welcome to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark.
I'm Sherry Contos.
Happy to have you along. Well, each and every week we send out the opportunity for you folks to send in questions. It usually provides a question with a little bit of detail. Mm-hmm. And so Sherry is going to play our Vanna White.
I'm Vanna today.
She's going to read the question and give us a little bit of detail. And then I'm going to make her answer it.
No, I was going to say, here's the deal. I have the question. You have the answer.
We'll flip a coin.
No. Okay. All right.
Go ahead.
This is an interesting question. Does every average person have to pay Social Security tax and file taxes? Now, that's the question. Does every average person, define average, but does every average person have to pay Social Security tax and file taxes? The information is, I know someone who's in their 70s and has not paid Social Security tax or filed taxes since they retired. They have no other income. Is it mandatory?
Okay, so you do not have to file taxes if you do not owe. Okay. So with Social Security income, if you look at your tax return, it is about 60% down the page, maybe 70% down the page. There's a column for you to put the amount of Social Security benefit you received in the middle, mm-hmm. and then off to the right in the ledgers, the amount of income that is taxable. Right?
Okay.
So the maximum amount under current law that your Social Security can be taxed is 85%. That's the maximum amount of the contribution or the money that you get that is taxable.
Okay.
And it's based on the amount of other income that you have.
Okay.
So if somebody was having some income tax withheld from their Social Security, mm-hmm. so they were automatically paying into it, or automatically paying taxes, and that was more than enough to cover what they would have owed, or they would have been entitled to a refund even perhaps, then no, they don't have to file. Right?
Okay.
They could be wasting money very easily. Right now, where we get into this conversation and question, though, does the average American pay taxes? Anybody who has earned income on line 7 of their tax return, and there's other places that you can get it as well, all pay into Social Security while they're working. That's the money that goes to what we call FICA.
Right. Yeah.
That's 7.65% of everything that you make.
Yeah.
That comes out of your check. And then your employer matches the other half. If you're fortunate enough to be self-employed, like we are, you get to pay both sides at 15.3%.
Jeez.
The other part of the tax is the marginal bracket. And that's the one where you, if you think stair steps start to go up.
Yep.
And the average American does not have anything on this. It's 54% of Americans don't pay any taxes on the marginal side.
Yeah.
But 100% of Americans pay taxes on earned income.
Right. Okay.
So there you go. Hey, you're listening to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark, along with Sherry Contos. If you got a question or comment, shoot us an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com.
Hi, Joni Michaels here. We know you care about your money, but are you tired of worrying about it? The Financial Enhancement Group takes care of people just like you who don't want to worry about their money. As fiduciaries, the team at the Financial Enhancement Group will care for your nest egg just like they would care for their own if they were in your situation. There are many decisions you'll need to make as you face retirement, and the team at the Financial Enhancement Group is here to help you. Call 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com to set up a time to meet. The confusion and complexity of retirement is almost as daunting as is the excitement of retirement. Don't let your fear and frustration of taxes and investing derail your retirement. Call the Financial Enhancement Group at 800-928-4001. They'll give you a complimentary second opinion on your strategy for retirement. Begin your adventure in your life after work. Call 800-928-4001 or yourlifeafterwork.com. Now back to Consider This program with Joe Clark.
You are listening to the best of Consider This, put together over the last few years of this show. Hey, for those of you who have not heard of required minimum distributions, and as Sherry points out, I live, eat, sleep, and breathe this every day of my life. So it's hard for me to imagine people not knowing that these are out here.
I think a lot of people don't know this.
It's happening more and more where I'm finding people who either forgot that they were going to have to take required minimum distributions, or they forgot that the rules existed and what the penalties were. So we're going to go over what we call RMDs in detail here, just to give you some insight. Remember, the essence of this show is that we have 10,000 people a day now, and for the next 18 years, turning 65 years old. That means that they will be approaching this wonderful thing called required minimum distribution, and Uncle Sam will have his hand out. The penalty, let me just say that, when you're required to take a minimum distribution, the penalty for failing to do so is 50%.
Huge.
50. It's one of the largest tax penalties there is. But 1980, we decided, the people decided the idea of tax deferral in an IRA would be a good plan.
Sure.
It would be a good thing, right?
Right.
And it was actually in the 70s for the IRA. 1980 was the 401k. But they were 40 years old in 2015, just to give you an idea. And the idea of tax deferral was when you looked at your marginal tax rate bracket, remember that's your income on line 43 of your 1040, that you could say, I don't want to pay taxes on this amount of money. IRAs used to be $2,000. 401ks were up to 25% of your pay, but maximum of maybe $7,500 to $10,000 a year.
Right.
Now they're a lot more. In an IRA, you can choose to defer $5,500 a year if you're under 50 years old, and in an IRA or a Roth IRA if you want to go that way and you qualify. $6,500 a year if you're 50 or over. And in a 401k, we're talking about $18,000 if you're under 50, and $23,000 rather if you're over 50. So big numbers that are out there in terms of what's going on and where we are. So let's just start with the basics. Required minimum distribution occurs technically the year after the year that you turn 70 and a half. So the one of the biggest things that we do financially that is different than very wealthy families, there's continuous ongoing, what you'd almost have to call succession planning for wealth, right? To make sure that each generation is able to keep it as opposed to lose it to the IRS. And those conversations go on constantly about how stuff is done. In middle class America, in the Midwest, I was raised to make it on my own, not count on mom and dad. I tried to raise my kids that way. But from a tax standpoint, I have to tell my kids, listen, we built a company. God blessed us. It worked, right?
Right,
so,
yeah.
We're going to have a problem here if we don't pay attention to what's going on.
Right.
The farm families that we take care of, the tool and die firms. If we don't think about this as an ongoing process, bad things are going to happen.
Yep.
When it comes to your retirement, if you don't think about it as an ongoing thing, you're going to have a challenge. So we'll start with a special rule. You can wait to take 2 withdrawals out of your IRAs until after the year that you turn 70 and a half. But remember, that year you're going to make 2 distributions. Why would you ever do that? And the answer is if you were still going to work when you're age 70. We've got a gentleman that's going to retire this year from one of the shops in Indianapolis. He wanted to work until his 70th birthday, and I think it's a month or 2 away. Congratulations, and he made it. it may make more sense for his required minimum distributions to be 2 in the following year as opposed
when
to
he's
this
not
year,
making all that money.
when your bracket changes. The challenge, remember, when we've talked about before, when it comes to a required minimum distribution, your tax return is very much like a symphony or an orchestra. Each instrument works together. And so when you retire, line 7 on your earned income is gone. You're not earning any income anymore. You may still have interest or dividends or capital gains. You may have a pension. You may have Social Security. But what's going to happen is when we have to add that required minimum distribution, the age you turn 70 and a half, let's assume you're married filing jointly, right? Or married, you're married and you've been married for longer than 10 years. When we look at that, your required minimum distribution is going to be about 3.4%. So if you've got $1 million IRA, I just put $34,000 on your tax return. And guess what? If the market goes up, if I do my job managing the money, the amount that you will have to take out the next year continues to go up. Even if it stayed the same, Sherry, your life expectancy goes down.
Right.
Because you're another year older.
Right.
So by the time you get into the late 80s and early 90s, you're taking out 9, 10, 12% of whatever the value of your account is every single year. And all of that is showing up on your tax return. And people get angry that they have to take the money. They find that shocking.
Right.
2, they really don't like what it does to their Medicare premiums. And 3, they really don't like what it does to their Social Security taxation.
Yeah.
So I understand the frustration. It's just there.
So that money where does that go on your tax return?
It shows as an IRA distribution. It's middle of page 1.
Okay.
There's the right where the line says pensions, IRAs is right above it.
It's right above it. Okay.
Right. So remember, and this is one of the things that we use for people that are in their, they're still working, but they've got IRAs, but or they've retired and they haven't needed to use the money yet, and they're not 70 and a half yet. We do a lot of Roth conversions. I can show you some neat strategies that really have no tax risk at all. You still have the market volatility if you're using equities, but you were going to have that anyhow. Mm-hmm. But to be able to make a tax situation or a tax strategy where there's no loss, right? Where if it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, you put it back.
Right.
But to help people get money into Roths. And some people, well, why would you ever do that? Well, I'll tell you why. There's no required minimum distribution. So that's pretty huge. There's a family in Lafayette. They live on 2 Social Security payments, his and hers. Yeah. They live on 1 pension, so their taxable income on line 43 last year was $59,000. Mm-hmm. Right. Remember, you can make up to 74 and be in the 15% bracket.
Yeah.
Right. And they happen to have $2.5 million in IRAs, and their kids are all docs and engineers.
So it's just sitting in that IRA.
Sitting in their IRA. They're going to have to take out required minimum distributions in 4 years.
Yes.
Right. When it comes out, instead of them being in the 15% bracket, they're going to be in the 25% bracket. Nothing that they can do to stop it. And if one of them dies, you may say, well, at least they lose a Social Security payment. Yeah. If they die, it gets worse because your tax bracket now actually collapses. It becomes the widower's penalty, or widower's penalty. Because you're no longer married filing jointly, you're now filing as a single individual. They should be taking out some money out of that IRA every year up to the $74,000 taxable income at 15% bracket, because whether they like it or not, whether they believe in God or not, He is there and He will call them home. Yeah. And when He does, the taxes that they are going to pay are going to go up. And when you think about that pain of paying the IRS more, one would think you would be a little more accurate. So how do you calculate your life expectancy? How do you know what it is? Technically, it's IRS publication 590B. Most people will use Table 3, the Unified Lifetime. And when you go in there, it will tell you what your life expectancy is for a particular age. And then you can calculate what percentage that you're going to have to take out. Please remember, as I've said before, if you have more than one IRA, you have to add up all the required minimum distributions from each account, but you can choose to take them from one IRA. And again, there's none for the Roth. You don't have to add that in. You will not receive credit for the additional amount when you take money out, that's one of the questions I get. Can I take Can I take more than my RMD for this year so that I can take out less next year? Great strategy, but it doesn't work. Right? It's you can't eat less this meal and hope that it works better.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. It doesn't work like that. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. There's a lot we have to discuss with this, and I want to make sure that we're taking our time to do it.
Yep.
So if you go to the website at yourlifeafterwork.com, you will find a conversation called RMDs Part 2. This was obviously Part 1.
Hi, Joni Michaels here. Joe's been hosting financial radio programs for over 20 years, and during his 7 years at Purdue, Joe developed the 5 critical elements. You see, there are 5 areas we all go through that can impact and even derail our retirement plans. YourLifeAfterWork.com has been focused on you on your retirement for over 20 years. You may have had a 401k as well as IRAs. Those are all defined contribution plans. Consider this program is about your defined contribution plans becoming defined distributions. You see, we all exit. You'll either take money out of those retirement plans when you decide or when the IRS decides, or your heirs will have to deal with the situation, but we all exit. I encourage you to call 800-928-4001 to meet with one of the talented financial advisors at the Financial Enhancement Group. I've listened to this show for years, and what Joe says just makes sense. Don't you think it's time for you to call 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com. Now let's get back to the show.
You are listening to the best of Consider This, put together over the last few years of this show. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark.
I'm Sherry Contos.
Happy to have you along. I am not a, the market is falling, cover your head. The market is going to 1 million, better buy in now.
You don't panic.
I don't do, we are very discipline driven. So I'm going to give you some things that I want you to consider today.
Okay.
I don't want you to consider changing what you own. I want you to consider changing your process for how and why you own it. And I want to take you back into the time machine. The year was 1996. It was December.
Okay.
We had this very charismatic Federal Reserve chairman. His name was Alan Greenspan. And I ask most people, you have a degree in finance, so you may remember the one before, but do you remember who the Volcker, and nobody knew Volcker's name, right?
Okay,
unless
everyone knew Greenspan's
unless you in my
name.
world, because of CNBC and everything else.
Right.
So in 1996, December, he issues a speech where he essentially says irrational exuberance, right?
Yeah.
Said the market was just simply irrational, and he may have been right, he may have been wrong. Sure was going crazy.
Why did he even bother to say that?
Because the valuations in his mind were way out of whack.
Okay.
And things were growing in the market quicker than they were growing in the broad-based economy. It's a true point.
Yeah.
The problem is the market can be wrong longer than you can be financially solvent.
The market can be wrong longer than you can be. Okay, got it.
Okay, so the market went up in 97 and 98 and 99, had a little bit of volatility. And we hit January 1st of 2000, and we watched this ugly word. And you've not heard this word, my friends, and since 2010. And so again, this is not a scare tactic. I'm just trying to give you some things to ponder and consider.
Okay.
The word is capitulation.
Okay.
And capitulation essentially means panicked activity.
Okay.
Right? So when we talk about it, it's usually capitulation, and you can think back to the fall of 08, March of 09. People capitulated out of fear. They sold everything. They got out of the market. They hid money in the mattresses. This cannot go on forever kind of attitude.
Right, yeah.
I'll be broke in 2 weeks at this rate. They capitulated out. What happened in 2000, after Y2K, the biggest non-event that never occurred, right? People capitulated in. They were tired of watching their neighbors buy new cars, their houses being paid off, having money in the market, eating at Morton Steakhouses. They were tired of it. And so even though they'd listened to Greenspan in 96 and gone through the process of this is ridiculous, eventually they capitulated. They had a panic activity, a lack of discipline, and put money back into the market right at the worst possible time.
Okay.
Now, I'll fast forward you to a more known time, if you will, for many of us. And it was January of 2008. And there's I'm not picking on E-Trade. Please don't take it that way. We keep all of our money at TD Ameritrade. I don't consider E-Trade a competitor. E-Trade is where people want to do it on their own, do it. We manage money for more than 650 families in 25 states. That's what we do. $300 million worth. So what I'm trying to take you through is that we have a discipline and a process, and I think you need to as well, because there are things that are starting to reappear. That doesn't mean that this is time to go sell. It does not mean that at all. This is not an irrational, exuberant speech.
Okay.
But in January of 2008, E-Trade essentially put out a commercial where they had a baby making stock trades. You might remember it. He'd call out of the crib. He had his little phone. He was making trades. And they showed him as a marketing genius, if you will. And it debuted in the 2008 Super Bowl. The market was already off 10% by the time of the airing, and eventually another 42% over the following 13 months.
Whoa.
The message was, making money is so easy that even a baby can do it.
Wow.
Well, now we fast forward. It's almost a decade later, and people forget. And now E-Trade has a new kid in town. If you see the commercial, and I haven't seen it but once or twice, but essentially it shows this dummy who's kind of flunking out of school, jumping off of his yacht, and it says, the dumbest guy in high school just got a boat. Don't get mad, get E-Trade.
Wow.
Right? Now, when you start to see the masses get into the market and start behaving like that, it is usually indicative of bad things to come.
Yeah.
Right? In 2007, I had people who were trying to pull money out of IRAs to buy condos at the peak in Florida and everything else. Guys, you have to be very, very careful. So here's what I want you to consider. And again, this is not me telling you the market is going down. We are actually still bullish. But how in the world can we be bullish at this point? And the answer is, we look at money through the lens of three different areas. So I'm the macroeconomist, if you will, and I look at the big stories. What's going on in the world? What's Merkel doing with Marconi? What's going on with Draghi? That's all Europe. What's going on in the United States with Trump versus the healthcare bill, et cetera. That's really kind of my job, paying attention to demographics and looking at it. And if you haven't been to our website, you can go find our article from last week. I said, don't argue with, or don't confuse me with the facts. And it talked about things we remembered, from Katrina to Kennedy's assassination to 9/11, and what in our minds say, oh my goodness, if this happened, what would the market do? And we always think it's very, very, very negative. And if you go back and look, it wasn't. It really wasn't. And you really ought to read the article. Don't confuse me with the facts. You can find it at yourlifeafterwork.com at our website. But that's my job, is to look at things like this E-Trade commercial and the behavior of people.
That's crazy.
I have been successful at calling the bottom of markets with that behavior, with looking at that a couple times in my career. I felt very, very blessed to be able to do it.
Yeah.
I will tell you, at tops, what I do, looking at macroeconomics, worrying about this, that, or the other thing, does not help you, right? Does not help. I have not gotten one of those. I couldn't have told you March 10th was the top of the tech wreck in 2000, right? And I'm good at this, guys. It's been my life for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, my CFA, Adam Harder, who's part of our team, one of my partners, he does the fundamental analysis of the things that we hold in the economy and the market. He doesn't try to call the bottom or top of anything. He tries to look at fair valuation to determine what percentage of our assets should be allocated to either equity or fixed income, whether it should be international, whether it should be here, whether it should be in an individual equity, or whether it should be in an industry. That's his job, chief investment strategist. Many of you who are listening to this program who do this on your own function that same way, and there's nothing wrong with it. But let me remind you, that's 1/3 of the equation. Andrew Thrasher is our chartered market technician. He doesn't pay attention to the fundamentals, and he doesn't care about anybody's last name or who they're talking with or what dinner they're having, what tax code's changing, what bill is happening. He looks purely at the technicals of the market. And some people say, well, Joe, that sounds like voodoo. Let me remind you, technical analysis started really in the 1890s. We didn't do fundamental analysis until after the Great Depression, when companies finally had to start reporting and giving us K1s and the quarterly reports and the annual report. So it's not hooey-pooey. And what I will tell you is, I believe technical analysis is better at finding the top than I ever will be at my discipline of finding the bottom.
Technical analysis, I mean, I don't know we have time, but I don't even know what that is.
It's paying attention to the money. There's an old expression that says the trend is your friend.
Okay.
And it's essentially a bunch of different mechanisms that follow is the trend of an individual equity, the trend of an industry, the trend of a country, the trend of a market, the trend of of investment going in a positive direction or negative direction.
Almost prediction.
And it's no. It's not predictive. It's telling you what's happened in the past, thus what will most likely occur in the future.
Well, yeah, okay.
And so it is a series of probabilities that they use based on a long-term experience. Folks, don't change your holdings today, but you might want to reconsider your discipline. Shoot us an email with your questions. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. Sherry and I got to take a break. We'll be right back.
Hi, Joni Michaels here. We know you care about your money, but are you tired of worrying about it? The Financial Enhancement Group takes care of people just like you who don't want to worry about their money. As fiduciaries, the team at the Financial Enhancement Group will care for your nest egg just like they would care for their own if they were in your situation. There are many decisions you'll need to make as you face retirement, and the team at the Financial Enhancement Group is here to help you. Call 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com to set up a time to meet. The confusion and complexity of retirement is almost as daunting as is the excitement of retirement. Don't let your fear and frustration of taxes and investing derail your retirement. Call the Financial Enhancement Group at 800-928-4001. They'll give you a complimentary second opinion on your strategy for retirement. Begin your adventure in your life after work. Call 800-928-4001 or yourlifeafterwork.com. Now back to Consider This program with Joe Clark.
You are listening to the best of Consider This, put together over the last few years of this show. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark.
I'm Sherry Contos.
Sherry, I've told you this before, but one of the difficulties of the world of what I do teaching people was clearly exposed when I taught at Purdue. And I spent 7 years, 14 semesters there.
The difficulties in doing what you do? Okay.
I have to communicate with people.
Right.
And we run our practice in here to a large degree. You don't have to pick which stocks you're going to own. It's not your job to determine what's going on in the economy.
Right.
That's our job.
Right.
But I still want to educate you in terms of the overall operation.
Right.
The macro rather than the micro. Not the minutia. And the hard part is forgetting what I already know to be true and have known to be true for so long that I don't tell new people.
Right.
Right. So, teaching at Purdue, it taught me that I had to start over every semester. And so I had to make a list of these are the things that I wanted to teach, because you forget what you already know.
And you have all new people.
You forget that you never knew it, that you, at one point in time in your life, that you didn't know it.
Right. Exactly. So,
when I first got into the industry back in 1987, it was 2 weeks before the crash. The concept then was you buy some mutual funds, you put your money in a bunch of various buckets for investment purposes. When you retire, you stick all of the money in the bank or in a laddered bond portfolio, and you clip coupons and live happily ever after.
Right.
And go about your business.
Right.
That is by 1991 or 92, I recognized that system did not make sense in the world that we lived in today from a tax perspective. And so I started trying to teach the world about how money needed to be able to be looked at in three different areas: the cash amount of money that you have, the fixed income producing assets that you have, and then the equity assets that you have. So equity by definition are stocks, and you can have income come in the form of two ways: dividends that they pay along the way, or you can sell them and take your profits, which would be a capital gain, hopefully not a capital loss if you sold it at a loss.
Right.
The middle, if you would be the fixed income, which means bonds typically, and then the bottom is cash. And so I put them together in a system that we called the funnel solution system, and used it for years. And the idea was that when we felt the economy was very, very strong or solid, we would have 80 up to 80% in the equity funnel. And if we thought the economy was weaker and collapsing, we could fall down to 60%. The below that, the dividends and the capital gains and such would fall down to the funnel below it. The funnel below it would be the fixed income, the bonds. And again, depending on where we were in the interest rate environment and the economy, you could have somewhere between 20 and 40% of your money in the fixed income. And then the bottom was cash. And if you needed for your income, for your retirement, if everything was working perfectly, you would have 3 months worth of your income in cash. When we thought things were negative and bad and frustrating, you could have as much as 18% of your money in cash, or 18 months in cash.
Yeah.
But I was reading through the Journal of Financial Planning. That's my job. Out pops this article that essentially says understanding your buckets, and it's kind of like, okay. So the more I read, the more I realized that
They copied.
This was just well, it's not the copy. It's I probably wasn't the first one to have that thought.
Yeah.
We were certainly on the cutting edge because it was very much different than what the industry thought back in the early 90s. But I wasn't the only one. It just surprised me in 2016. How to make the buckets work for you is an article or a title, and you really do need to pay attention to the perspective of how money's taught. If you're going to do this on your own, if you're going to manage money on your own or for somebody else, I know we've got a lot of people in the industry who listen to the show as well. There are 4 things that you always have to be aware of: risk and volatility, fees and expenses, taxes, both today and tomorrow, and fourthly is the real return, making sure that you get something above zero plus inflation. And the buckets have to be looked at both from a system of managing the volatility, if you will, especially if you're in the distribution phase of your life when you're retired. But it's designed to be that income growth part, right, on in the top funnel, or if you want to use their terminology, the bucket, where the equity is. But it's really isolated away from the bond side and isolated away from the cash side. What the article was trying to say is, listen. You can't just put it all in you can't put it all in stocks and live on the dividends, because the volatility can kill you.
Yeah.
Right? You can't just put it all in bonds and clip coupons, because bond rates go up and down as markets move back and forth. You can't just put it all in cash, or you're going to have zero real return. Inflation's going to eat your lunch, and you're just going to be around longer than that. But in the early 90s, I would look at people and go, listen, your retirement is going to last as long as your working career did in many cases. 2 people make it to age 60. There's a 90% probability today that one of them makes it to 90.
90, yeah.
That's 30 years,
right?
And most of us aren't. I guess I'm going to have 30 covered. This is my 28th year, but a lot of people don't work 30 years in their whole career. By the time they get out of grad school or med school or being an engineer.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So when we look at a new family that's coming in and sit down with them, I always start with the 1040. I've told you that before.
Sure.
I want to make sure that it's in good order, and identify very, very quickly the tax planning strategies that ought to be applied. If you haven't caught it before on the show, you should always know what line 7, what your AGI is, and line 43. Those are the 3 numbers that matter the most on your tax return in terms of what your planning opportunities really are. We sit down and we figure out what the family's needs and objectives are, divide the accounts into the models as necessary, and then we use the risk barometer to determine, like I talked about in the funnel solution system, you could be between 60 and 80% in equities. If you're in a balanced account, that's going to be between 50 and 70, right?
Yeah.
But the risk barometer is what really gives us that guide to where we need to be inside of that equity exposure. So once all of that's done, we figure out, okay, how do we make this the most tax efficient we possibly can? Because again, markets go up and down. When you send a check to the IRS, it does not come back, and so we want to make sure that money is protected to the best of our ability, not just for the snapshot, not just the 1040 this year, but all stocks that are going forward. And then last but not least, you have to make sure the liquidity is in good order. So if you're going to buy a car or buy a house, or you're going to retire, and we've got to provide monthly income, we need to have that system in place set up so that you're getting the money that you need with the least amount of volatility and the least amount of taxation, that we can possibly get it out. And that's the formula, if you will, the format for providing success. You just shouldn't have all of anything, all cash, all bonds, or all stocks. And the number of people who come in here to see us who've got 8 or 9 or 10 mutual funds, and they're all in equities. And without understanding, they think they're diversified because they've got many pieces, but you're not really diversified at all. You have to understand the ingredients that are in the pot. Let's just put it that way and keep it at a cooking conversation. Know what ingredients went in, and then you'll know what it's going to taste like when it comes out.
Hi, Joni Michaels here. Joe's been hosting financial radio programs for over 20 years, and during his 7 years at Purdue, Joe developed the 5 critical elements. You see, there are 5 areas we all go through that can impact and even derail our retirement plans. YourLifeAfterWork.com has been focused on you on your retirement for over 20 years. You may have had a 401k as well as IRAs. Those are all defined contribution plans. Consider this program is about your defined contribution plans becoming defined distributions. You see, we all exit. You'll either take money out of those retirement plans when you decide or when the IRS decides, or your heirs will have to deal with the situation, but we all exit. I encourage you to call 800-928-4001 to meet with one of the talented financial advisors at the Financial Enhancement Group. I've listened to this show for years, and what Joe says just makes sense. Don't you think it's time for you to call 800-928-4001, YourLifeAfterWork.com. Now let's get back to the show.
You are listening to the best of Consider This, put together over the last few years of this show. Sherry, I am often asked, what books should I read to be able to know more about investing, the markets, etc. And I do my best to answer that. I will tell you, in the years that I taught at Purdue, they bought a textbook for the first semester. It was $240. It was a few hundred pages thick. And it had errors in it. Not that in one case it was a blatant error, and in another case it was the tax code had changed by the time they were able to get there to do stuff.
I don't know how you would ever publish a book and have it be current.
You can't, which is why we don't do textbooks. There was actually a professor at IU that used me and a few other certified financial planners. In his he's got a paragraph or two, and then it's a video. And it's my responsibility to go in and tell him when that video is now out of date and he needs to update it. Which I think makes a whole lot more sense.
It does
in terms of what's going on.
Yes.
But this is an article that came out May 16th of 2016. Right? From CNBC.
Not too long ago, really.
May 16th. No, not at all. It says retired couples should consider using the restricted application strategy to make the most of their Social Security retirement benefits, according to CNBC. Getting the primary workers benefit as high as possible is the key to optimizing retirement benefits, says an expert. When retired couples file for restricted application, the higher benefit can be enjoyed by husband and wife while they're both alive. Yeah, well, that's special. Now, unless you listened to the show where you knew the last date you could actually do that was April 30th.
April 30th, yeah.
It is already passed, but by the time that they wrote it, doesn't cite who the expert is. But this is one of those things that I try to caution people against. If you saw something from a major news source that was dated May of 2016, you would presume that this is still a viable, ongoing thing. And the answer is changes occur all of the time. You have to be careful to what is going on out there. Now, there is a big question that I want to turn to now. I like to call it, and many of you, I forget how old I'm getting. But one of my favorite commercials was a little old lady at the fast food shop, known as Wendy's.
I know what you're going to say.
She would say, "Where's the beef? Where's the beef?" Right? And I love that show as a kid, or that commercial as a kid. Before we had TiVos and direct, DVRs, we actually watched commercials. Where's the beef? It was iconic. And as we move through this cycle of life, the baby boom is moving quicker and quicker, or I should say more and more, into the retirement phase of life, or what we call distribution. And I think one big mistake that we tend to make as individuals is we don't recognize that we're at a different stage at all. We do our best to save as much as we can and get by. We try to deal with the emergencies that occur. We look for something that is the most tax effective on this year's return. We do things that tend to feel good in the moment without necessarily having that overall directive. And I will tell you that you're going to go through 3 distinctive phases of finance. And the illustration that we always use is a plane ride. I've got pilots as clients that fly those big birds. And, to me and everybody else on the plane, if we go to Indianapolis and we walk down the ramp and we get on a plane, they're going to bring me a glass of water, a cup of coffee, and they're going to load the plane. Eventually, they're going to take off, and we're going to get to 30,000 feet. Well, they'll turn the seatbelt sign off, and we can roam around the cabin if we need to, right? And then eventually, they're going to land the plane, hopefully in a safe place where we wanted to actually arrive, right? So when you think about that, if I told Jim or any of my other pilots that they did nothing different in each of those three stages, from the loading the plane to the 30,000 foot to the landing the plane, they would be insulted and offended. Now, to you, you're just an average passenger,
It's
Sherry.
the same for me.
You're just riding by, right?
Yeah.
Very distinctive time. And I think one of the problems that we make with money is we don't recognize that we're going through those three very, very different phases. So that first thing, when you're loading the plane, we call that accumulation.
Right.
Eventually, the plane will get to 30,000 feet, and that's when we call preservation. Now, Sherry, you may be saving money at this point, but what you're saving doesn't matter as much as what you've already accumulated, as much as already is in the nest egg, if you will. I have a family that we've taken care of here in Madison County since 1997. You know all the engineers of the world. They're very meticulous with numbers, and so he knows his average return has been 7.8%. Net of fees and expenses, and not everybody's is that. That varies, right?
Right.
But that's what his has been since 1997, going all the way through. Net of all fees and expenses, he knows the number.
And he's watching
In
it.
fact, since the end of '08, one of the things that we do is put that on every statement.
Yeah.
So people know exactly what they have earned, what they've paid in expenses and fees, the things that we really believe that matter. So they can see the last 5 years. They can see what their average return net of fees and expenses have been since the end of '08. And have a better comparison than simply just looking at these year-to-date numbers. Mm-hmm. Well, in this gentleman's case, they're finally ready to land the plane.
Yeah.
That next phase, which is distribution, when you start to pull it out. And he showed up and he essentially said, Joe, we've averaged better than 7% for all of these years. The way I do the math, we can start to take out a little more than $100,000 a year, and we're going to be fine. And we'll hold the coffee, right? It doesn't work that way. And in preservation, when the plane is at 30,000 feet, the only thing that matters is average return. But you have to be there beginning, middle, and end, right, to get that average.
Right.
So in his case, he knew his numbers. It's better than 7%, right? But that was the average. That didn't mean we didn't live through a tech wreck. It didn't mean we didn't live through the turmoil of 2008 and the early part of 2009, right?
But why was he wrong then? Because he lived through that.
He lived through that on an average return, Sherry.
Yeah.
He lived through that. So there were very few years where he earned 7%. There were years where he earned 14. There was years where he earned 2. There was years where he lost.
Okay, but how does that affect him taking out $100,000 a year now?
Well, very, very simple. If you take it out, are you there at beginning, middle, and end?
He's got to take it out sometime.
If you take money out, are you there beginning, middle, and end?
No, you're not.
So average return only matters
if
you were there at the beginning.
Right.
If you were there at the middle.
Right.
If you were there at the end. Mm-hmm. It only matters then.
Okay.
When you go into distribution.
Right.
And you begin to take money out monthly.
Right.
Or quarterly. Or annually.
Right.
That money never gets, if the market happened to be down.
Yeah.
That money never got to grow up to be the bigger number. It never got the rebound from the market.
So what was the right answer?
I went back, we teach people in here that the number is 3.8%. So if you've got $1 million, I can give you $38,000 a year of income, and I have no fear at all.
I see what you're saying.
Gonna happen.
Okay.
I went back and did the numbers for him. It happened to be in his case, if he could have taken out 5.1%, but any more than that, and he would have actually eaten into principal as opposed to continue to grow.
Oh,
so
he was counting on average from
the
that.
average return has nothing to do with distribution.
Got it.
When you go to land the plane, the two critical factors that you have to have are making sure that the amount of tax that you pay on every dollar you pull out, right? That is one, and then the volatility, the amount of ups and downs that go between the distributions.
Right.
They just haven't thought about it. I mean, here you have a very well-known engineer, right? And it just had not crossed his mind, because for so many years when you have your 401k, the Fidelities of the world, average return, average return, average return. And it's just not average return. It's understanding that guide path that you're on. And again, if you're over 55 and you're getting ready to do this retirement thing, please make sure that you understand distribution and don't let people talk to you about average returns. Hey, you're listening to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark, along with Sherry Contos. If you got a question or comment, shoot us an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com.
Hi, Joni Michaels here. We know you care about your money, but are you tired of worrying about it? The Financial Enhancement Group takes care of people just like you who don't want to worry about their money. As fiduciaries, the team at the Financial Enhancement Group will care for your nest egg just like they would care for their own if they were in your situation. There are many decisions you'll need to make as you face retirement, and the team at the Financial Enhancement Group is here to help you. Call 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com to set up a time to meet. The confusion and complexity of retirement is almost as daunting as is the excitement of retirement. Don't let your fear and frustration of taxes and investing derail your retirement. Call the Financial Enhancement Group at 800-928-4001. They'll give you a complimentary second opinion on your strategy for retirement. Begin your adventure in your life after work. Call 800-928-4001 or yourlifeafterwork.com. Now back to Consider This program with Joe Clark.
Hey, you're listening to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark, along with Sherry Contos. If you got a question or comment, shoot us an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. You are listening to the best of Consider This put together over the last few years of this show. Well, good morning and welcome to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark.
I'm Sherry Contos.
Happy to have you folks along. One of the common questions I get came in this week, again, was what do I do with my CD and this very loss of income?
Yeah.
And it is a true issue. And there's things that people forget that banks don't always want to tell you about. So,
you mean options?
Yeah. First of all, what is a CD? Well, it's a certificate of deposit. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that all, but every CD that I've ever experienced has the following rules. You lock your money in for a period of time. Could be 1 year, could be 1 month, could be 6 months, could be 5 years. I've seen 7-year and 10-year CDs. Mm-hmm. Nobody buys them, or most people aren't buying them right now because the interest rate environment is so very, very low. Right. We all know that. But the way the deal works, so in this particular case, the person called and said, I have a CD that is coming due on Friday. I have to make a decision. Typically the banks, and I don't know about credit unions per se, but typically the banks, if you don't make a decision within 10 days, they will automatically re-enroll you in a new CD. Yeah. Where people believe they're trapped. So in this gentleman's case, he had what we would call a laddered CD portfolio. So he had one that was coming due on Friday, has one that's coming due next year, one that's coming due the following year, and so forth. Yeah. And we looked at the interest rates. I asked him the question, which we're going to talk about. I said, why do you have money in a certificate of deposit anyhow? Mm-hmm. And he gave me 2 answers. Actually, he gave me 3. One, he was scared of the market. By the market, most people mean the stock market, without understanding the fixed income market. Right. Which, if you're listening to the show, hopefully between the next two, this segment and the next segment, you will understand a little bit more about income because we're going to devote that much time to it. So he was scared of the market. That was one. The second thing was that he wanted to try to have money that came due every year so he could take out what he need and reinvest the rest. That's how people would build laddered bond portfolios years ago. So they would buy 20-year bonds, and each year one would come due. They would live off of what they needed to live off and buy another one for the 21st year. Wow. So that they constantly had 20 years. It was an interesting way to go if you want to live inside of that world and you know what your income structure was. But the third was he didn't know, he hadn't thought through that there's a difference in money. So when I talk to people that are in this situation, there's what I call today money, there's tomorrow money, and there's later money. Okay. Right? So when one of the often mistaken, in my opinion, things about retirement planning that people do is, they say, well, I'm retired now, so I can no longer afford to take the risk. Right. And so they'll move money from the equity side into fixed income or into cash. And I try to remind people, folks, if you're 60 years old and you're married and you're in reasonable health, that doesn't even mean great health. The actuaries tell us there's a 90% probability one of you makes it to 90.
Right.
That means I've got to, Joe, as your financial planner, as your retirement liaison, I've got to make sure that you have income for the next 30 years. So that's as long as your entire career. So this notion that we should take all of our money and put it into something because we can no longer afford quote unquote risk.
Yeah.
And think about it, folks. That's only principal risk, right?
Right.
That's the risk that it goes away. That doesn't deal with inflationary risk, business risk, credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk. There's about 13 different risks that just because you ignore doesn't mean they're not there, right? So we have to think about money that's today money. And money that I'm going to use today, I need to have in a money market or a short-term CD. You're not going to have any growth on your money. You're going to lose to inflation. But the point is you plan on using that money in some time, and then in my mind, the next 6 months, right? To buy a car, go on a vacation, pay for a wedding, a down payment for a business or a building or a house. It's one of those things where the growth doesn't matter near as much as what the liquidity does, right? And so that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, what is tomorrow money? Tomorrow money to me is money that we're going to use over the next 3 to 5 years, right? Now, people will say, Joe, is the market overvalued? And again, they're talking about the equity market. Is the market overvalued or not overvalued? And I can't answer that. I can tell you that there are individual companies that we feel very comfortable with at the Financial Enhancement Group. Adam Harder, our internal CFA and chief investment strategist, and our chartered market technician, Andrew Thrasher. When the three of us look at the portfolios and build them, we look at things like, okay, what do we expect this thing to do over the next 3 to 5 years, not the next 3 to 5 months, right?
Right.
Andrew would look at it as a technician, would look at it on the shorter term. Adam would certainly look at it on a longer term. But the three of us are able to come together to get that process done. So you treat money that you're going to use over the next 3 to 5 years differently than you would treat money that you're going to use in the next 30 days.
Does that mean you have it invested differently?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And sometimes even in different institutions.
Oh.
I have a bank account.
Right.
Now,
right.
The majority of our money is at TD Ameritrade, right? Because it's not money that I plan to use tomorrow. That comes out of my income.
Right.
But when people come in and we help them plan and program their retirement, it's very common for us to have a bank account, not with a lot of money,
right,
but a bank account here locally, and then we use their assets to produce an income. So income is deposited into their account, just like a pension every month.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, they've essentially created their own pension. But then there's later money, and that's money that you may or may not get around to using.
Yeah.
It's money that you may think you plan on using for retirement. What I will tell you happens invariably is because we don't know when God is going to call us home. Right. Yeah. Most the people that I deal with don't die broke.
Right.
Right. There's always money that's left over, and the industry thought process is when you get to a certain age, you shouldn't own equities. And I loved my wife's grandmother. Grandma Lear passed away at age 98, and it was around 2005, 2006. CD rates were 3.5%, 4.5%.
Yeah.
And most people would say at 98, she should have been all in cash and all in CDs. And I would raise my hand and say, let's use some common sense, folks. She hadn't spent it all yet.
Right.
And she's probably not going to spend it.
Right.
And which would my mother-in-law rather inherit? A CD at 3% or a rising market like crazy back in 2008 and 2005, 6, and 7?
Right.
So you really have to use your head and understand those three different scenarios in terms of how your income, where your income is going to come from. So Sherry and I are going to take a break. We're going to come back, though, and we're going to talk about the different ways that you can produce income, whether you're in retirement, preparing for retirement, thinking about retirement, or you've got money that's sitting around today. And I'll teach you the one rule about certificates of deposit, CDs, that the banks just fail to get around to explaining to you. Anyhow, it'll be worth your time, I hope. If you got a question or comment, you can shoot me an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com. We really do think that's what it's all about. yourlifeafterwork.com.
Hi, Joni Michaels here. Joe's been hosting financial radio programs for over 20 years, and during his 7 years at Purdue, Joe developed the 5 critical elements. You see, there are 5 areas we all go through that can impact and even derail our retirement plans. YourLifeAfterWork.com has been focused on you on your retirement for over 20 years. You may have had a 401k as well as IRAs. Those are all defined contribution plans. Consider this program is about your defined contribution plans becoming defined distributions. You see, we all exit. You'll either take money out of those retirement plans when you decide or when the IRS decides, or your heirs will have to deal with the situation, but we all exit. I encourage you to call 800-928-4001 to meet with one of the talented financial advisors at the Financial Enhancement Group. I've listened to this show for years, and what Joe says just makes sense. Don't you think it's time for you to call 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com. Now let's get back to the show.
You are listening to the best of Consider This, put together over the last few years of this show. All right, we got time for one more.
Okay.
Mariko Gordon is a chief investment officer at Drama Capital Management, and he said it's very important not to be prejudiced and stubborn. You have to be open-minded, but you also have to be very disciplined and grounded and firm too. So it almost sounds a little contradictory, but I got called on this, and very, very valuable lesson. You do this for 28 years, and things are going to happen. You know, I'm a very, it's, they say there's three things you don't talk about in Indiana, right? Religion, money, and politics.
Yes.
Well, everybody who's listened to the show or my students at Purdue know I'm a Christian conservative who manages money. So now that we got
are a lightning rod.
Now that we got that out of the way, I'm one of those bad guys, right?
Yeah.
Now that we got that out of the way, seriously though, the issue is knowing what my biases are. And I have a lot of friends that didn't do so well under the George Bush administration when he made dividends a more tax efficient instrument. Back in March of 2003, their tax code change came down, the market went rocketing, and some of my friends in New York hated the Bush so much that they refused to understand the value of what was going to be there. Fast forward, I had a lot of friends that really had no use for the current president, in the first term, let alone 7 years later,
right.
And could not see how there could be any possible way that the market could do well, and obviously 2008, first part of 2009, it clearly wasn't. And then because of all of the QE and everything else, the market rocketed its way up. You have to remove your biases and your stubbornness. There's an old expression, it's okay to be wrong, you just don't want to be wrong long, right? So when things change, you have to be willing to change. And that doesn't mean you change your morals or give up on your principles. There's just some things that you've got to be rigid about. One of ours is, again, counting irregularities. We're just not going to go there. IPOs, initial public offerings that come out, people will say, hey, are we going to be able to get into that? Should we get into that? Honestly, we don't want that kind of excitement. Look at the IPOs from last year, Alibaba, and where it was and how far it fell. Even Facebook, which now would have wound up being a wonderful thing, but Facebook got cut by a monster amount, after it went public on its original drop. We want to be able to have data, information, be able to access that, and to be able to run that through that proprietary risk barometer that we have that says, okay, it's time to be on offense. It's time to be neutral, or it's time to be on defense, and make sure that our money is going in the right direction. Hey, you're listening to Consider This. I'm Joe Clark, along with Sherry Contos. If you got a question or comment, shoot us an email. Consider this at yourlifeafterwork.com.
You've been listening to Consider This program with Joe Clark. As a certified financial planner, former professor at Purdue University, and with 31 years of experience helping families just like you eliminate the fear and confusion of retirement, Joe's team has the answers to your questions. Go to yourlifeafterwork.com or call 800-928-4001 and find a time to meet with the Financial Enhancement Group. There's nothing that will separate you from your retirement as fast as the IRS. There are many questions that can be answered at the Financial Enhancement Group. Questions like when to take Social Security, how will my 401k be taxed? These questions are just the tip of the iceberg, and you need to be asking these questions now before it's too late. The Financial Enhancement Group has offices in Anderson, Fishers, and Lafayette, Indiana, but they also take care of families in 30 other states. You care about your retirement, you don't want to worry about your money? Then the Financial Enhancement Group is right for you. As fiduciaries, they are required by law to treat your money as if it were their own, and they were in the same situation. Call 800